Thank you for coming to today's presentation on plagiarism and academic honesty at UC Merced. I'm going to start sharing my screen now. There is what's the word I'm looking for? There's a guide for this particular class. And let me get out of my Slack channel and into the UC Merced Libraries page. To get to the guide for this workshop, you want to go to Research and Academics right here. And when the pull-down menu shows up, go to Research Guides. And then to Learn About. And scroll down to Plagiarism and Academic Integrity at UC Merced. And that will take you to the guide for this workshop. So what I want to talk about today is, first of all, the general topic of plagiarism and academic integrity, specifically what it means here at UC Merced. But what I also want to do is do a little practicing. And I'm going to focus here on citation and paraphrasing, not necessarily how to cite, but when you have to cite, and what a paraphrase looks like, and what role a proper paraphrase plays in work. So first of all, what is academic integrity? Put simply, it is honesty. Honesty that is adhered to in the course of academic endeavor. And academic dishonesty, and the definitions are right down here, are any form of dishonesty perpetrated by a student or researcher in the course of customary academic endeavor. And that phrase, customary academic endeavor, is particularly important because we are talking about dishonesty that impacts the university. Obviously, if you tell your friends that you don't want to go out, that you have something going on when you just want to stay home and veg, that's a mild lie, but it doesn't impact the university. It doesn't interfere with the university's progress or functioning. So academic dishonesty is that which interferes with the university's proper function. And it's also any offense committed against the integrity and good name of the institution. And that's particularly important. I noticed today the Chancellor Munoz sent out email saying that for the first time in the history of UC Merced, a student had been named as a Rhodes Scholar, which is a wonderful thing. But you see how we celebrate those who maintain and promote the good name of the institution. Plagiarism and academic dishonesty are such terrible offenses because they directly impact the not only the customary academic endeavor of the university, but also the university's good name. And I have a quote here from Rutgers University: "The perceptions about the quality of an institution and the value of its degrees are based on the belief that graduates earn their diploma honestly." So what must be there, what's needed for a university to maintain a good reputation, is the belief on the part of anybody who might be interested, prospective students, prospective employers, the students and faculty themselves, that a student's work was honest and that each one did it him or herself. So that's what we're here to talk about today. There are many, many different examples of academic dishonesty: lying and deception. You claim to have submitted work that you didn't submit, making up a reason for missing a deadline. Cheating, which in its most base form is simply sharing information with a classmate during an exam or for an assignment. Copying someone else's work and submitting it as your own. Fabrication, which is making up information or research. You're supposed to assemble a survey for class and you don't feel like it, so you just make up a bunch of numbers and say this is a response. That's fabrication. Sabotage, which is destroying someone else's work to give yourself an advantage. Doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. And then, of course, plagiarism. And I'm going to get to that in a moment. Before I talk about plagiarism, I want to talk about academic integrity at UC Merced. There's an entire office, the Office of Student Rights and Responsibilities, that is responsible at UC Merced for overseeing charges of plagiarism and academic dishonesty. So if you just later after this workshop, if you want to click on the link to OSRR, you might want to take a look through just to see what information is available and how UC Merced regards plagiarism. The short answer to that, of course, is it's pretty darn serious. And the UCM Code of Student Conduct includes an academic honesty policy. Academic misconduct includes, but is not limited to, cheating, fabrication, plagiarism, altering graded examinations, having another person take an examination for you. And there's 1,000,001 ways to cheat. I won't go through all of them here, but those who work in the Office of Student Rights and Responsibilities are very aware of those ways to cheat. So what happens if you're accused of academic dishonesty here at UC Merced? So I have a link here to resources on academic integrity, and you might want to take a look through that just to see what resources exist to help you avoid plagiarism and charges of academic dishonesty, but also what do you do if you are charged or accused of academic misconduct? There's a document attached right here. Just click document, and it's an outline of the process at the University of California. And this applies to all campuses, not just UC Merced. And it's what happens essentially when a professor or an instructor or a GA or anyone really brings a charge of academic dishonesty against another student. I'm not going to go through all that right here. We've got bigger fish to fry. But you should know there is a process. So it's not like somebody's going to say that person cheated, leave. There will be an investigation. You'll have an opportunity to defend yourself or explain your actions or deny the charge outright. And there will be people who adjudicate this process. So please don't worry about being summarily dismissed, because that just doesn't happen. So what is plagiarism? So one of those words that gets bandied about quite a bit, but never really gets defined. So it's probably the most widespread form of academic dishonesty in colleges and universities around the world. So this is by no means unique to UC Merced. Believe me, it's happening all over the planet. At its base level, its lowest level, it's simply taking someone else's work and representing it as your own. An idea that you didn't come up with, a paper that you didn't write, or even maybe a section within a paper that you didn't write. These are examples of plagiarism. Pretending that an idea is yours when you found it in a resource created by someone else. There are some universities that think that plagiarism can also be an instance of you overhearing someone else's idea. Maybe you overheard a conversation somewhere, and you take that idea and represent it in your work. Others are not so sure. That's one of those gray areas. So just try to think of it conceptually. There was somebody came up with an idea. You thought it was a really good idea, but it's not your idea because you didn't create it. And then you try to include it in your work. And then, of course, in written assignments, plagiarism is the failure to distinguish your words and ideas from those in a different resource that you consulted, created by someone else. By the way, it is possible to self-plagiarize. If you created, let's use an example. Let's say you wrote a paper for a history class in your sophomore year here at UC Merced. And then the very next year, you take another class and another history class, and you decide to quote yourself from your original paper. You still have to cite where you got the information. So yes, you can plagiarize even though the ideas are yours. Remember, ideas developed and presented by someone else, whether it's in your own work or an exact quote or a paraphrase or a summary, you've got to cite that work. If it's just, that's the most simple explanation. Not your idea, not your words, cite it. So the common causes of plagiarism, the reasons why this happens, number one, improper paraphrasing. And I'm going to talk more about paraphrasing in just a moment. Incorrect, incomplete, missing citations. If you have used someone else's work in your own work and you haven't cited that information, or the citation was incomplete, maybe you cited the journal it came from, but you didn't cite the page numbers or the author, or the citation is just incorrect, that is a form of plagiarism. What I have found is that most people plagiarize unintentionally. It's just inadvertent, a mistake. You forget to write down the source of an idea or concept, and then you think about it later, but in the time between when you read the concept and the time when you actually start to put down your ideas on paper, you forgot that you actually read about this information somewhere else. So it goes into your paper, but you haven't cited it. There is a very famous historian in this country, Doris Kearns Goodwin, who has won Pulitzer Prizes for her work. And she writes about presidential history. And she was, you've heard of, you've heard of her. She included a lot of passages from other books in a book she wrote about the Kennedys, the Fitzgeralds and the Kennedys. And when she was called on it, you didn't cite this work. This isn't your work. She said, I have so much to do and I'm so busy, and, I had my teaching work to do, and on and on and on. And so she basically was forced to resign from Harvard University. She no longer teaches there. So yes, plagiarism can have some real life consequences. And the other thing that happens, you're pressed for time and you start to cut corners, which is probably the most common reason for plagiarism in a university setting. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that towards the end of this presentation. So now let's talk about citing. We have lots and lots of workshops here at the library on how to cite, and we've got workshops on MLA format and APA format. We've got all sorts of assistance for helping you create the correct citation. We have bibliographic citation managers. What I find that most people have issues with is when to cite, like what information was I actually supposed to cite? So let's talk a little bit about that. First of all, a proper paraphrase is a complete restatement of someone else's ideas in your own words. And I'm going to come back to that in a moment, but paraphrases must be cited. Any idea or concept, if it's not yours, put it, tell us where you got that information. Now, a proper citation is a full and correct citation in the format of your choice. So whether it's MLA or APA, the citation must be correct. And so here's where I come to probably the most important aspect of this particular workshop. Take notes on everything you read. You read a journal article or a book and you come up with the concept, ooh, yes, that supports my argument. I should note that in my work. Don't even hesitate. Write down both the information and where you got it right away. This way you're not backtracking later after the paper is already written. Oh my goodness, where did I find that information? This is a real lifesaver. So what don't you have to cite? Extremely common knowledge or general statements, you don't have to cite there. So I give you an example from information assurance. A properly managed information assurance program is crucial to the protection of the integrity, accuracy, and reliability of the information flow of any corporation. Unless this is an exact quote from somebody's work, you don't have to cite it. Of course, information assurance is important to corporations. That's fairly obvious. So you don't have to cite that unless you're citing this sentence, which was part of somebody else's work. Here's where we get to a gray area. Knowledge that is common to the discipline depends on the circumstance. So, for example, I've said here, organizations that establish standards for appropriate information assurance practice include ISO, NIST, and the Committee on National Security Systems. So, if you're in an information security class or in an electric engineering class here at UC Merced, chances are your professor knows what ISO and NIST and the Committee on National Security Systems are. He or she may not want you to cite that information, because everybody already knows, because it's common knowledge in those disciplines. But if you are writing, say, for an English class, say writing 10, and your instructors are all English PhDs, they may not know what ISO, NIST, or the Committee on National Security Systems are. In such a case, then you do have to cite. Best thing to do is speak with your instructor about what they consider obvious knowledge in the profession and what's not. Now, when I taught information assurance at a different school, the professors wanted people to cite information like this just because they wanted to make sure that the students knew about these organizations. They knew, but students might not. So where'd they get that information? Again, cite. And of course, if this were a direct quote from someone's work, you would have to cite that. Now, knowledge that is not common, either in the discipline, excuse me, or outside, must always be cited. So we've got a quote from an article from the International Organization for Standardization, ISO, their 2013 survey. On trend from last year's, 3 sectors exhibit steady growth: information security management and food management, respectively boasting a healthy 14 and 15% increase in certification, while the medical devices sector similarly shows a 15% increment. Okay, first of all, the ISO 2013 survey is not common knowledge, so of course it has to be cited. But numerical data, tabular data, charts always have to be cited, even if you think that the information is commonly known, because you are citing exact numbers. And if you cite a number, unless you made it up wholesale, as in the fabrication charge, obviously you got it from somewhere. If I were to write a paper right now about population trends in Merced, and I were to say something like the Asian population of Merced has grown 3% in the past decade, while the Latino population has grown, in contrast, by 7%. Where'd I get my numbers? Did I invent them? Did I just, pull them out of a hat? No, I got those numbers somewhere, so I have to cite that. Again, numerical charts, tabular data, always cite. And then we get to the gray areas. This is stuff that might be common knowledge in a particular discipline, but not common knowledge for non-practitioners. What's common knowledge and what's not is always a gray area. So let me give you an example. A nurse will know what a nasogastric tube is. And if she's writing an article about something that involves a nasogastric tube, and she's writing it for a nursing journal, it's assumed that the people who read nursing journal are themselves nurses. You don't have to explain to them what a nasogastric tube is. They already know. Now let's say that the person who's writing is a student nurse. One of the things her instructor or his instructor might want to know is that the student does indeed know what a nasogastric tube is and where that information came from. In such a case, the nursing student would indeed cite that information. So you see, it depends on the circumstance. So here's a couple of examples of things you don't have to cite. The sky is blue. The Pacific Ocean is a big ocean. General opinions usually don't have to be cited either. The skies are bluest and prettiest in the Sonoran Desert. California beaches are the best beaches on the planet. Captain Jean-Luc Picard is a better starship commander than Captain James T. Kirk. Just general opinion, doesn't have to be cited. But if the opinion is at the center of my assignment, like I'm writing, Captain Picard is a better starship than Captain Kirk, here's why, then any evidence I present has to be cited. Where did I get the evidence? Well, I got it from the TV shows. So if I might look at, say, 5 episodes where Captain Picard was faced with a dilemma and 5 other episodes where Captain Kirk was faced with a dilemma. In such case, I'm going to have to cite the title of the episode, the screenwriters, the directors, and everything else that goes into a proper citation for a television show. So as an example, when their starships were threatened by enemies in the neutral zone, Picard did X, but Kirk did Y. Which episodes did all this happen? Cite the episodes. If you're not sure, ask your instructor. I can't be more clear than that. Your instructor is going to be the ultimate arbiter of anything you do here at UC Merced. If she or he decides that certain information needs to be cited, she or he will let you know. If not, I'd ask anyways, just to be on the safe side. Let's back up to the top. And how to paraphrase. Let me get to the meat of things. It's easier to start with what a paraphrase is not rather than what a paraphrase is. So I've got an example of original text here. Colleges and their information assurances programs need to have strong policies in place to cover student usage of virtual labs, network access, and for how to handle academic misconduct. An incorrect paraphrase, it's far shorter. Universities and the IA departments should have really good procedures to cover use of labs and networks and handle bad behavior. So why is this incorrect? Number one, superficial changes to vocabulary. I'd say this is the most common form of paraphrasing, of incorrect paraphrasing. You just make a couple of word changes here or there. So colleges and their IA programs, universities and their IA departments. Strong policies to really good policies. Same concept, but the words are not sufficiently different. And what's more is you've introduced inaccuracies in your paraphrase. So university program isn't necessarily a department. And labs and networks, the original text was about virtual labs, not actual physical locations. And it dealt with network access, not networks in general. You also have to be very clear in your paraphrase. In the paraphrase here, we've used bad behavior. Academic misconduct is a very specific form of bad behavior. Bad behavior in general could mean anything from hacking or cheating, which are forms of academic dishonesty, or eating or drinking in the labs, or throwing a party in the labs, or using lab computers to watch porn or anything else that's against university policy. So be very clear. A correct paraphrase is a complete restatement of the ideas you're hoping to convey, but it must still be accurate. So I've got a correct paraphrase here. I'm running a little low on time. So here's what I do here to get the correct paraphrase out of my original text. First of all, identify the concept or the idea that you want to convey. In this case, you want to restate the facts that students have brought lawsuits against IA programs that have sanctioned them for academic misconduct. Then create a paraphrase of that concept. Correctly convey all of the information in that idea or concept, but do so with substantially different words. And of course, that paraphrase must include a citation to the original source of the information. So what I said here was beware the chunk. Chunking or chunking is whole phrases that you've taken out of the original text and just pasted into your paraphrase. I'd say that's probably the most common way that people incorrectly paraphrase. So colleges and their IA programs should write some strong policies so that they're protected from bad student usage of virtual labs. The idea is correct. The concept is correctly conveyed, but you've got big chunks of words, complete, just copied wholesale from the original. Again, it's got to be a completely new way to restate the original concept. And this is a good thing to do, not just for your work, but because you really want, doing so requires that you do a fair amount of thinking So this is a great way not only to make sure that you understand the original information, but that you can synthesize it and present it in a new way, which in itself indicates to your instructor or to your reader that you do indeed understand. So there are a couple of free online plagiarism checkers that I like. I tend to think that it's better if you do your own paraphrasing and citing before checking in with the plagiarism checking services. But they're there in case you're still unsure. Otherwise, I certainly hope that you will take the opportunity to contact me or one of the other librarians, or for that matter, someone in the Writing Center to get some tutoring assistance. Additional resources we have available here. Here are some bibliographic citation managers. These are the 3 citation managers that we support at UC Merced: RefWorks, Zotero, and Mendeley. These can make your work a lot easier. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of proper citing. All the same, these won't paraphrase for you. So you still have to practice your paraphrasing to go with those wonderful correct citations. And we do have some upcoming workshops, and I will leave you to surf through those at your leisure, but we've got a number of workshops on citing in MLA format. We had one earlier in the year on citing in APA format. And we've got workshops coming up on using Zotero and RefWorks. And finally, I'm almost out of time here. Quiz time. So, just as an example here, here's my original text. The Spanish still controlled the northern part of Venezuela, including Caracas, as well as much of the Viceroyalty of New Granada. But Bolivar had gained territories in the eastern provinces of Venezuela and along the Orinoco. The revolution was not progressing as swiftly as he had hoped, but he believed that it was time to encourage elections in the liberated regions and to have a constitution. Take about 60 seconds. Which of these is the correct paraphrase? And I've included a couple of hints, so think very carefully. We'll take about 60 seconds, so at 3:31, we'll come back. Okay, it's 3:31, so I am just going to click the correct one. Hit submit so we can see. Yeah, 1 vote. Oh, you didn't vote, Melinda. That's okay. So let's take a look at this first one. Even though Venezuela wasn't yet independent and the Spanish still controlled the northern part, Bolivar thought it was time to have a constitution. So the Spanish controlled the northern part. That's right out of the original text. The Spanish still controlled the northern part. So there's some chunking going on here. Bolivar thought it was time to have a constitution. And right up here, it was time to have a constitution. Lots of chunking going on there. And down here, Bolivar wasn't very happy with the speed of the revolution. The Spanish still controlled Caracas and almost all of the Viceroyalty of New Granada. Remember what I said about not introducing inaccuracies or inconsistencies in your paraphrasing. So we don't know if Bolivar wasn't happy. The original text says the revolution was not progressing as swiftly as he had hoped, but he believed that it was time to encourage elections. So was he happy about this? Was he unhappy about this? We don't know. So this third option has introduced an inaccuracy in the paraphrase. So of the 3 options here, the second one is the best. Our central concept, Bolivar did want a new constitution and elections for Venezuela, even though the Spanish hadn't been completely expelled. That's the central idea. Just rephrase the whole thing. And I'm just about out of time here. So for question number 2, this is fairly obvious. Of the following statements, Extremely hot water can cause severe burns, so you should be careful when boiling water for cooking or cleaning. Well, yeah, no kidding. That's fairly obvious. The second one, most adults will suffer third-degree burns if exposed to 150-degree water for 2 seconds. Burns will also occur with a 6-second exposure to 140-degree water. Where do I get all this numerical data? And how do I know that third-degree burns will ensue as opposed to first or second degree? All of that is information that has to be cited. The first one can go without if I were including it in the assignment because, we all know hot water burns. So again, take notes on everything you read and start your assignments early so you can think about what you've read and restate it fully. So I wanted to include this in closing in this particular workshop, because I've done workshops for students who had a plagiarism charge brought against them. And the first thought is, oh my goodness, I'm a horrible person. No, you're not a bad person. What happens is that people start out with good intentions, but you just haven't left enough time to do the reading or the thinking. And then, it's 2 days before the paper is due and you get desperate. You just want it all over and done with so you can move on to other things. Maybe you're working a job and you just don't have enough time to sit and think or write. So this is when the corner cutting starts. And you get careless while you're taking your notes or careless about other people's ideas. And it all just devolves into one big blur. And the student has neither the time nor the inclination to resist the blurring. So if you really want to avoid plagiarism and incorrect citations, number 1, take notes. Number 2, start early. Time management is essential. So we're at 3:35. I know we started a little late, but I'm afraid I've already kept you here a little longer than I expected. Are there any questions before I leave or close the workshop? Thank you all very much.